For the human race to achieve a bright and sustainable future, we first need to tackle a few fundamental issues. CO2 emissions and climate change come to mind first of all, as well as a better and more practical way of disposing waste and rubbish, and lastly, a more efficient way of harnessing renewable energy. We're already seeing new innovative ways people are making a difference. Regardless of how big or small these new ideas are, they're all great steps in the right direction for a brighter future. It doesn't make sense that some food items that may get consumed within hours or even minutes should leave behind a piece of packaging that will linger on Earth for hundreds of years. Think of a granola bar, a mini yogurt container, a bag of chips, or a bottle of juice. These items, together with countless others, offer such a brief satisfaction at a long-term cost, whether the destination is a landfill site or the convoluted, unreliable process of a recycling facility, and of course, the ocean. What if there are alternatives? Rather than using petroleum-based plastics and instead biodegradable and even edible products. A lot of these new innovations are still in their infancy stages and won't directly fix the plastic problem we are faced with, but I think they are great steps in the right direction. An Indonesian startup company, EvoWare, has created and developed a packaging wrap using seaweed that is edible and biodegradable, as well as dissolves with hot water. EvoWare plans to make dissolvable packages for instant coffee and seasoning in instant noodles. Instead of opening the tiny little plastic packets and throwing them away, these packets will dissolve when the boiling water is poured onto them. Seaweed is a great crop to have around. It naturally absorbs carbon dioxide in the sea, making it a great alternative not only for packaging, but for CO2 emissions. Tomorrow Machine is a design studio based in Sweden and is producing some of the most innovative packaging design concepts. They have a number of different ways of packaging products, from beeswax and seaweed to caramelized sugar coated with wax. After cracking open the container, the wax no longer protects the sugar, and the package begins to melt when it comes into contact with water. Bakeys is a Kickstarter company and has set the goal of creating an alternative to plastic utensils. Currently about 40 billion plastic utensils are discarded within the United States in just 1 year. Worldwide, this figure becomes 16 times larger, and the vast majority of these utensils are only ever used once and then discarded. However, Bakeys utensils will naturally degrade within 10 days, and the lack of water, moisture and fat in the products allows it to have a considerably long shelf life of up to 3 years. The Ocean Cleanup is the first large-scale plan to rid the oceans of millions of tons of plastic waste. This ambitious plan is the idea of Dutch inventor and entrepreneur Boyan Slat, and he intends to prevent mainly plastic debris and ghost nets becoming an even bigger threat to not only animal life but our own lives, by collecting tons of plastic before they disintegrate into tiny microplastic fragments. Once they reach that point, it is near impossible to deal with, and they have already entered the food chain. Slat's design involves massive V-shaped booms that collect trash using the ocean's currents. They act as artificial coastlines that passively catch debris and then concentrate it into the center. From there, it's offloaded to a boat that sweeps by periodically once a month. In addition to this, Slat no longer thinks that the booms need to be grounded to the ocean floor. Rather, he plans to suspend the booms with large anchors that float in deeper water, so the booms shift around in the ocean, though still more slowly than the trash at the surface. The anchors will be suspended on lines in 4 segments, each 40 feet tall and 13 feet wide. They have a total surface area of 328 feet square, enough to provide plenty of drag, slowing down the booms as plastic waste circulates around the gyre. Slat once imagined one massive device extending around 100 kilometers. He now envisions up to 50 devices, each a kilometer across. If one device breaks down, there will still be 49 others operating at any one time. They will then recycle and sell the plastic they have gathered to further fund more vessels. And with a fleet of 50 systems, Slat plans to clean up 50% of the Pacific garbage patch in just 5 years. A newly discovered microorganism could be a huge contributing factor against the fight and our addiction to plastic. A team of Japanese researchers have discovered a type of bacteria that break down PETs and consumes them. Prior to this new bacteria, we had discovered a type of fungi that was tricky to cultivate and not as practical. Unlike fungi, these microbes are easily grown, and the researchers more or less left the PET in a warm jar with the bacterial culture with some other nutrients, and a few weeks later the plastic was gone. The real innovation here is that the team has identified the enzyme responsible for the bacteria being able to break down the PETs. All life forms contain enzymes that are used to speed up necessary reactions. Some enzymes digest our food, dismantling it into useful building blocks. Without the necessary enzymes, the body can't access certain sources of food. The researchers identified the gene in the bacteria's DNA that is responsible for the PET digesting enzyme. They were then able to manufacture more of the enzyme, showing that PETs could in fact be broken down with the enzyme alone. This opens an entirely new outlook to plastic recycling and decontamination. Right now, most plastic bottles are not truly recycled. Instead, they are melted melted down and repurposed into other hard plastic products. A large majority of packaging companies would rather freshly made plastics to make the best quality products possible. The PET digestive enzyme offers a new outlook to what it means to truly recycle plastic. But it's not as simple as unleashing hordes of PET metabolizing bacteria into landfills. Because of how plastic is meshed together, to break down the bonds takes a reasonably long time. However, after heat treatment, the plastic bonds gradually decay, allowing the microbes to easily decompose the plastic. China's capital, Beijing, is one of the most densely populated cities in the world, closing in to an overwhelming 22 million people. This produces a thick blanket of smog, predominantly from cars and other transportation, as well as neighbouring steel-producing facilities. This, coupled with the sheer amount of people, means that some days the city experiences some of the worst smog and air pollution ever. Not only that, people as young as 8 years old have been diagnosed with lung cancer. Life expectancy has plummeted by 15 years as a result of filthy air. This inspired a Dutch artist and architect named Dan Roosgaard. While staying in Beijing, he looked out his hotel window and saw how bad the smog could get, to the point he couldn't see the rest of the city. He thought to himself, this is not the bright future we envision. So he and his team came up with the world's largest air purifier, the Smog-Free Tower, which stands 23 feet tall and is capable of sucking up 30,000 cubic meters of polluted air per hour. Areas around the tower can have 55 to 75% cleaner air than the rest of the city. They had noticed that 42% of the particles that had been collected was carbon. Carbon under immense pressure forms diamonds. Roosgaard and his team had the idea to compress the waste carbon and in turn make their very own smog diamonds. They are now selling rings and other jewelry to fund more towers in China and eventually India. Each jewelry piece represents 1,000 cubic meters of pollution. India's capital, New Delhi, has recently seen some of the worst air pollution and smog ever, with levels of toxicity in the air 10 times what is considered safe. In some areas, when the smog is at its worst and visibility is close to zero, everyday exposure is the equivalent to smoking 40 cigarettes. This is due to, again, the amount of people using transportation, as well as industries, but predominantly farmers in nearby regions, burning millions of tons of crop waste in preparation for winter. This immense smog gave two entrepreneurs an idea of collecting those smog particles and turning them into ink. Their process starts with a reusable device called a car link, which attaches to a car's exhaust pipe and filters between 85 to 95% of soot from entering the air, and turning it into air ink, which is simply carbon particles that have been collected and combined with solvents to produce black ink. However, CarLink doesn't capture CO2 and other harmful gases that might be present. Instead, it focuses on carbon soot, which contributes to a dangerous pollution called PM 2.5. This type of pollution can get lodged in the lungs and cause chronic lung disease and asthma. Nature has its own way of getting rid of CO2. Acidic rainwater percolates through rocky volcanic landscapes made up of mainly basalt. Over time, these rocks slowly dissolve. Some of what dissolves from these rocks form ions of calcium, iron, magnesium. It then reacts with carbon dioxide in the air to form carbonate minerals such as calcite. Over thousands of years, these minerals are buried, locking the greenhouse gas underground, preventing what otherwise would have ended up in the atmosphere. Deep below Iceland's geothermal power plant, scientists have created and started deploying a version of this natural weathering and precipitation process. They inject carbon dioxide straight into the subsurface where it reacts with basalt. However though, they didn't expect how well and quickly the CO2 would react with the basalt, taking less than 2 years, achieving the same result that nature does in only a fraction of the time. With the world's population expected to grow well over 9 billion people by the year 2050, we're in ever need for sustainable energy. Right now, most of the world's energy is produced by burning non-renewable fossil fuels such as coal, oil, natural gas and liquid petroleum, with a fraction of energy being produced with solar and wind, trailed by geothermal and hydroelectric dams. Each of these are ways of producing clean, sustainable energy, so why haven't we fully committed to these methods of producing energy? Each of these methods have several drawbacks and complications preventing us from fully harnessing the potential of 100% clean, renewable energy, for now at least. With solar energy, not every day the sun shines, and for residential solar panels, by the time you purchase and install them, a homeowner can spend anywhere between $4,000 and $16,000, depending on how many panels and the materials used. However, the cost for the panels themselves has drastically dropped by 60% since 2010, and manufacturers are finding new innovative ways to produce solar panels, as well as more efficient ways in capturing the sun's rays. There are even solar panels that are now able to produce energy hours after the sun has set. The technique involves the embedding of square spirals of conducting metal onto a sheet of plastic plastic, each of which is referred to as a nanoantenna, just 1/25th the diameter of a human hair. The nanoantennas absorb infrared energy, which is absorbed by the Earth during the day and released after the sun goes down. The nanoantennas are thus able to harvest energy both during daytime hours and into the early evening. Because they can take in energy from both sunlight and the Earth's heat, the nanoantennas have a much higher efficiency than conventional solar cells. The scientific principle isn't a new one, but the manufacturing process that maximizes efficiency certainly is state-of-the-art. The innovation within nanotechnology has allowed nanoantennas to be efficiently embedded to absorb energy in a flexible and inexpensive material. Harnessing the power of wind isn't really a new concept. It's been used for centuries to move ships, pump water, and grind grain. However, the first known wind turbine to produce electricity was built in 1887 by Professor James Blythe. Today we have entire wind turbine farms, each standing well over 200 feet tall. In Denmark, 42% of the electricity consumption came from wind power, and is set to achieve 50% by the year 2020, and leap to a massive 84% in 2035, just on wind power alone. However, wind turbines today are massive, dangerous machines, and to ensure the maximum amount of electricity is being produced, it requires a lot of maintenance. Most wind farms are in remote areas, and workers are faced with making repairs 200 to 300 feet in the air. Like solar panels, harnessing the wind is becoming more efficient, with new innovative concepts that get rid of the massive turbines currently being used. Machines like Inverlocks, which can function with winds as low as 3 km per hour. Wind is guided and captured at the top of the tower, no bigger than a 2-story house. It's then concentrated using a funnel, and is delivered to a Venturi system which squeezes and accelerates the wind, allowing it to be harvested by 3 turbines at the ground level, making it easier and safer for maintenance and repairs. Another way to get energy I didn't mention earlier, which accounts for more than 10% of the world's electricity, is nuclear power. Today's nuclear power plants all rely on nuclear fission, a chain reaction where uranium atoms are split and release massive amounts of energy, and unfortunately, high levels of radioactive waste which we have no real way of disposing of. Right now, radioactive material is being stored in tanks or in concrete and steel bunkers at sites that were only meant to house the waste for perhaps a few decades, certainly not centuries. Today the material is safe and poses no real risk, though in the future volcanic movement and eruptions, as well as earthquakes, could however unlikely hit and cause leakage of nuclear waste at any of these storage facilities. Taylor Wilson, a young entrepreneur and scientist, has designed a small and compact modular nuclear fission reactor that could be built on a factory assembly line and installed anywhere in the world. They're not only smaller and more efficient than existing reactors, but could use Cold War era decommissioned weaponry as fuel and power the reactors, which are intended to produce between 50 and 100 megawatts and powering as much as 100,000 homes. They would be between 10 and 15% more efficient than existing plants, partly due to not using water. Instead, the heat exchange takes place in a molten salt core that is buried underground, which makes it more secure. These reactors can offer us not only a way of disposing the world's nuclear waste, but an alternative energy source, at least in the short term, until we have the capable technology of harnessing the holy grail of clean, sustainable energy, nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion is the process and reaction that powers the sun. It involves smashing hydrogen atoms together under extraordinary pressure and temperatures, fusing them to form helium, and releasing a large amount of energy and radioactive waste in the process. However, unlike fission, this radioactive waste is short-lived and quickly decays to undetectable levels. Nuclear fusion happens constantly in stars like our sun, because their cores reach such extreme temperatures of over 15 million degrees Celsius. Fusion reactors would need to recreate these extreme conditions on Earth, and researchers are using 2 different approaches to achieve this. The first being tokamak reactors. They use a donut-shaped ring to house heavy and super heavy isotopes of hydrogen. These isotopes are heated to 100 million degrees Celsius by powerful electric currents within the ring. At these extreme temperatures, electrons are ripped off their atoms, forming a charged plasma of hydrogen ions. Magnets confine the charged plasma to an extremely small area within the ring, maximizing the chance that superheated ions will fuse together and give off energy. The heat generated can be used to turn water into steam that spins turbines, producing electricity. Laser fusion reactors use ultra-short bursts of very powerful lasers to generate the extreme temperatures and pressures needed to trigger a fusion reaction. These laser pulses can heat and compress hydrogen isotopes to a fraction of their size, forcing them into helium and release high-energy neutrons.